Hey guys, today we'll be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election based on the latest polling. As of right now, it is becoming clearer and clearer that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going to end up being their respective parties' nominees. On the right, Donald Trump holds a 42-point lead over Ron DeSantis. Nikki Haley has actually taken the third place position, while Vivek Ramaswamy has slid down from his third place position now to fourth. On the Democratic side, we see a pretty similar picture with Joe Biden. He holds a 50-point lead over RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson, and there's absolutely no doubt that Joe Biden is going to clinch the Democratic nomination for a second time, as long as he continues to be president and he does not face any major health issues. And so in this video, we're going to be filling in this map between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the two respective parties' frontrunners, and we'll be filling in the map based on the polling that we have from each of the individual 50 states. If we look at the betting markets right now for the 2024 presidential election, Joe Biden has a 42% chance at winning, while Trump only has a 37% chance. And third, surprisingly, is actually Gavin Newsom, with Ron DeSantis only having a 5% chance at winning the next U.S. election. At one point in time, just a few months ago, Ron DeSantis had a higher chance at winning the election than Donald Trump. So he has seen a huge fall from grace over the last few months, and I don't think any future debate performances are going to be able to save his floundering campaign. If we look at the Democratic nomination, Joe Biden has been pretty stable right now at around a 7 in 10 chance, while Donald Trump's odds continue to go up as time goes on. He has been skipping the GOP debates, but that does not seem to have hurt him at all. In fact, he is only climbing higher and higher, as essentially all the other candidates' odds are consistently going down. Ron DeSantis in just late June still had over a 1 in 4 chance at winning. Now his odds are all the way down to just a 1 in 10 chance at clinching the GOP nomination. So today we'll be taking a look at this map, starting off with the West Coast and moving our way east. So starting off in Washington, we have the latest polls showing us Biden with a 14.5% lead. The more competitive a state is, the more polls we'll have, and so we'll have more recent polls for those very competitive states. But for states that are less competitive like Washington, we're just going to work with what we have, even if it's a poll from June of this year. So Joe Biden on average leads by 14.5, just under the 15% mark needed for it to be solid. In Oregon, we have a pretty similar strong blue state for Biden, 12.5%. Oregon, though, is known to be traditionally slightly less blue than its northern neighbor. If we look at the 2020 presidential election, Biden won Washington by 19 points, and 16 points was the margin that separated him and the former president in Oregon. And to finish off the West Coast, California, with its 54 electoral votes, is not surprisingly going to be very solid for the incumbent. As we can see here, a 26-point lead for Joe Biden over Donald Trump in the state of California. There's absolutely no competition there. The West Coast is going to be entirely blue for the 2024 election, as it has been over the last 3 to 4 decades since the Reagan era. Moving inward here to Nevada, 6 crucial electoral votes. Joe Biden actually leads in Nevada by a 1% margin, but Trump is doing surprisingly well considering he lost the state by 2.4%. But I do believe that Nevada is a state Republicans have a future in. They just elected a Republican governor, Joe Lombardo, to unseat the incumbent Steve Sisolak. Although the Republicans were unable to win the Senate election, they did do surprisingly well, as that gubernatorial flip for the GOP in Nevada was the only one that they had throughout the country after the 2022 midterms. So Nevada is going to be a lean Democratic state on our map here, but it is definitely a state that Biden is going to have to work for, as Nevada is not nearly as blue as it once was. If we go back to even just 2012, Barack Obama wins Nevada by 7 points, and in 2008, of course, he won it by a monstrous 13-point margin over John McCain. In Arizona, we have a very slight lead for Donald Trump of 0.5%. Here we have most polls showing Trump ahead, although 2 of the older polls have Biden up by 2 points, and these 2 polls were sponsored by a Republican super PAC. And so when looking at the numbers in Arizona, what we're seeing is a very tight race, just like the one in 2020 where Biden won by 0.3%. But I genuinely do not believe that Republicans are going to be able to hold on to this state in the very end. Arizona has taken a huge shift to the left. Just look at their 2 senators right now, Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema, both elected as Democrats in 2020 and 2018. And of course, after the 2022 midterms, Republicans don't even control the governorship in Arizona, as Katie Hobbs was able to surprisingly defeat Kari Lake in a race that Lake was leading in for months leading up to the election in November. Moving up north to Montana, we see Trump with a 12.5% lead over Joe Biden. It will be a likely Republican state, but in the end, there's no doubt that Montana is going to vote red, just like the state of Utah, a 6 electoral vote state, where the only poll conducted here shows Trump with a 13-point lead over his opponent. And so we now have 2 of the Rocky Mountain states left with polling in it, and these are of course going to be Colorado and New Mexico, 10 and 5 electoral votes. We do not have polling from Idaho and Wyoming. Of course, these are some of the smallest and most conservative states in the country, but we do basically have polling from every single state on this map except for a select few. I believe it's around 8 states where we do not have polling in so far for the 2024 election. But in Colorado, we do have polls, 10 electoral votes. We currently see a 7.4% lead for Joe Biden on average, with Biden leading every single poll conducted in the state. And in neighboring New Mexico, once again, Biden leads in every single poll, a very similar lead here, 7.3%. So on the map, Colorado and New Mexico are both going to be likely Democratic states. If we look at the 2020 election results here, 13.5 was the margin for Biden in Colorado, and 10.8 was the margin in New Mexico. Now moving on to the very center of the country, we don't have polls from North Dakota or Nebraska, but we do have a poll from South Dakota. And in South Dakota, we see Trump leads by a very solid 21-point margin. Down south in Kansas, Republicans are up by 13.7%. These polls are mainly conducted for the Senate and governor election, mainly the governor election with Laura Kelly in 2022. But in every single one of these polls, Donald Trump is ahead by a double-digit margin, and he's also doing very well in Oklahoma, where Trump leads by 24.7% on average. So the middle of the country is going to be very, very red, just as it's been over the last few decades. Texas will also be voting red in 2024. I think Democrats will do potentially better than they did in 2020, but seeing Texas flip blue in just a year, I think, is going to be very, very difficult. It's 40 electoral votes. It will be a game changer once Texas becomes a blue state, but we are not at that point yet, despite the state continuing to shift to the left. We only have 2 recent polls from the Lone Star State, one of them even sponsored by a Republican PAC, and Trump only leads by a margin of 2.5%. This most recent poll from May of 2023 shows Biden behind just by 2% against the Republican president. If we look at polling or results from Texas over the last few decades, 5.6 was the margin for Trump in 2020. In 2016, it was 9. But in 2012, Mitt Romney was the last Republican to win Texas by a solid margin on the presidential level. And this has not been repeated since, and it will not be repeated in 2024 with Trump as the nominee. Trump, I think, will win by a pretty similar margin to his one in 2020. It might be higher, might be lower, but as of right now, the polling average only gives him a 2.5% lead, making Texas just a lean Republican state. Now we're going to move down, or I guess move to the right, and go down this strip of states bordering the Mississippi, starting up top with Minnesota, where Joe Biden holds a commanding 8-point lead over Donald Trump. This is a state that he won by 7 points in 2020, and Minnesota is the state with the longest Democratic voting streak of any state in the union. The last time it went red. You would have to go all the way back to the election of 1972 when Richard Nixon won every single state except for Massachusetts and the District of Columbia. So Minnesota is going to be likely Democratic on our map, while the remainder of this strip of states on the western side of the Mississippi are all going to be red. Starting off with Iowa, 6 electoral votes. This is one of Trump's major flips in the 2016 election. Iowa went blue to Barack Obama pretty handily in 2008 and 2012, but in 2016 and 2020, Donald Trump won them by even larger margins. So 6 electoral votes in Iowa is going to be red once again, as Trump currently holds a 9.2% lead in the state. This, of course, is the state that will hold the first Republican caucus, one of the most important races in any primary cycle. Although on the Republican side, the winner of the Iowa caucuses does not always end up winning the nomination, as we saw in 2016 when Ted Cruz won the caucus in Iowa and Donald Trump came in at a very close second. In Missouri, we see a 16-point lead for Trump over Biden. This state is not going blue anytime soon. It was a state that Barack Obama was very close to winning in 2008. Just 0.13% separated Barack Obama and John McCain 15 years ago, but now going to 2024, there's no chance that Democrats are going to be able to flip the state of Missouri. So it's going to be very solid red, and so are Arkansas and Louisiana. In these two states, we have a 25 and 15-point margin for Donald Trump, respectively. I'm also going to go over these southern states here that don't quite border the Atlantic. So starting off in Kentucky, we have a 22.5% lead for Donald Trump. Tennessee, a lead of 18.3%. Mississippi, 18-point lead for the former president. And finally, Alabama, where Trump leads by 25%. So all of these states are going to go into the solid red column. And now moving up into the Midwest, starting off with Wisconsin, this is the region that is going to decide the 2024 presidential election. And right now in Wisconsin, Joe Biden leads by 6%. Illinois, 13.5 for the incumbent president. So both of these states are going to be likely blue. The margin in Wisconsin really is pretty surprising considering how competitive Wisconsin typically is. I do currently feel pretty bullish for Democrats in Wisconsin, just considering how well they did there in 2022 with Tony Evers winning re-election as governor and Mandela Barnes doing much better than the three-time incumbent much better than expected than against the three-time incumbent Ron Johnson in the Senate. We do not have polling from Indiana, but in Michigan, this is going to be lean Democratic, with Joe Biden currently ahead by an average of just 1%. This is a must-win state for Biden if he wants to win re-election. And we have a must-win state for Trump if he wants to win re-election in Ohio, where he's up by 7.5%. So Ohio is going to be likely Republican, while Pennsylvania and its 19 electoral votes, another must-win state for Biden. This is Biden's birth state. Biden leads by a margin of 1.2% in the Keystone State. Democrats also did pretty well here in the midterms, with John Fetterman winning election to the Senate despite having plenty of issues in his campaign against Mehmet Oz. In the Northeast, nothing too exciting. Of course, it's all going to be blue. In New York, 28 electoral votes, Joe Biden leads by 16.6%. In New Hampshire, Biden leads by 9 points. This is one of the closer states up in New England, and in 2020, Biden only carried it by 7.4%. So things are looking good. Maggie Hassan easily won her re-election against Chuck Bolduc in 2022 for the Senate seat. She was able to win by a double-digit margin. So we're not going to see too much going on in New Hampshire, where it's going to be likely Democratic. We do not have polling from Vermont. However, in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, we have Massachusetts right here. 25-point lead for Joe Biden, and then Rhode Island, we have a 15.5% lead for Joe Biden. So both of these states are going to be solid blue. In Connecticut, Biden leads by 12.3%, so just ever so slightly closer. Not too surprising that Connecticut is polling worse for Biden, but it's still going to be blue nonetheless. We also have, I believe, one poll from Maine showing Biden ahead by just 11 points. So this is going to finish out at the Northeast. We do not have polling from New Jersey or Delaware. However, in Maryland, we see Biden with a solid 17-point lead. In the state of Virginia, we have Biden ahead by 8.8%. This is another must-win state. Of course, Glenn Youngkin was elected as the Republican governor of Virginia in 2021, but Democrats are going to be able to hold on to this state going into 2024. There's no doubt about that. And then the final 4 states here, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, every single one of them is going to be red. Not surprisingly, South Carolina is likely Republican, with Trump holding a 12-point lead. In North Carolina, Trump is doing surprisingly well, ahead by 5 points, considering he only won the state by 1.3% in 2020. And Georgia is actually a state that Joe Biden won in the last election, but as of right now, Trump holds a very narrow 2.2% lead. This is a winnable state for Joe Biden. Trump tried to overturn the election results here. I think that the race will get much closer as election day nears. And finally, in Florida, a state where Republicans are doing much better than they have done over the last 2 decades, Florida is no longer really the bellwether swing state that it once was, and the 30 electoral votes in Florida right now are expected to go to Donald Trump by a 4.3% margin. And finally, in Alaska, we don't have very many polls here, but the only poll we do have shows Trump up by 7%. And so with the states filled in with the polls, with the states that we have polling in, currently the map stands 246 for Joe Biden to 232 for Donald Trump. I mean, this really just goes to show you how competitive this election is going to be. Just looking at, sorry, I filled in the wrong thing for Maine here. It's supposed to be the at-large vote, not the first district. But if we do fill in the remaining states, because these are all going to be some of the most solid blue and red states, we will see that according to the polling we have right now, Joe Biden is on track to winning the 2024 presidential election just based on the numbers alone. As of right now, we have 276 to 247, and then Indiana, Wisconsin, and West Virginia will bring Trump up to 262. So based on the polling right now, we have a very, very competitive election ahead of us. 276 for the incumbent to 262 to the former president, with, of course, the key swing states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, as well as Nevada, all being very close, especially Arizona and Georgia, as well as Michigan and Pennsylvania. These are basically must-win states for the two candidates if they want to end up winning the election and a second term. But as of right now, the big takeaway from this is that really nobody knows who is going to win the election in 2024, and both major candidates have a very good chance, at least as of right now, in September going to October of 2023. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below who you think will win in 2024. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I will see you guys in the next video.